All right, thanks for tuning in to Eagles Brawl of the Brawl Network. However, you're listening, you're either on YouTube, you're on Twitch, Periscope, Facebook Live. We greatly appreciate it. Our Eagles Brawl insider, Ed Kracz, is in the house. Ed, wow, it's been some tough sledding for the Philadelphia Eagles right now. So I just want to start off with saying I watched that press conference with Doug Peterson today. I love how they end the presser with your question of offensive line, and he he gives the most like, yeah, Pryor did some things good, didn't do some things great.
Yeah.
Doesn't really go much into anything else other than that. I mean, Doug Peterson did not want anything to do with the media, yourself included, today at all. I mean,
Yeah.
whew,
Yeah.
what's up with him, man? I mean, the excuses too. He's making excuses that like a Super Bowl winning coach shouldn't be making. I mean, everybody's going through the same circumstances that the Philadelphia Eagles are going through. So for him to sit at that press conference and, I mean, drop these excuses about the not having enough time, 2 weeks. Look, I understand they have new playmakers. I understand there's new skill players on offense. I understand there's new coaches in there. But I mean, he's been the head coach for the team for a while. It's ever since they drafted Carson Wentz. The continuity in the major positions is there for the Philadelphia Eagles. The excuses aren't flying right now, my guy.
No, but they don't flush, that's for sure. But, the Monday press conference was all about Carson Wentz, as it should be, I guess. I mean, I think there were maybe 3 or 4 other questions that weren't Carson Wentz related. And his answers just aren't good enough about the excuses of, new personnel, new coaches, 2.5 weeks isn't enough time to get ready. But all 32 teams operated under the same guidelines and protocols. Every year you have a different roster that you're working with. It's just not a good excuse, but it could be just that Doug is trying, he's a player's coach. He's trying to protect his players. He doesn't want to come right out and say, Carson Wentz is really struggling right now. He does not look good. He's on a short leash. He doesn't want to say any of that stuff. And it's hard to blame him for that, but Bill Belichick handles it the right way and just kind of grunts and shrugs his shoulders and next question, next question. But Doug's not like that. He tries to give you the best answer that he possibly can, and it's just not good enough. And you can see right through these excuses that he's throwing out at us.
In your opinion, what's up with Carson Wentz? I mean, he's been so inaccurate. I told you off the air, I'm waiting for this groin injury that he suffered in training camp news to drop that it's hindering his play, that it's not fully healed. I'm waiting for that to drop. What's going on? I mean, the inaccuracy. I haven't seen him be this inaccurate in his entire career, this long of a stretch.
Yeah. Anything's on the table with Carson as far as what the reason is. It could be, like you said, maybe it's going to be that groin issue that kept him from practicing a couple days there the week before the Washington game. It could be that he's not comfortable with Jalen Hurts being on this team and the drafting of Jalen Hurts in the second round. It could just be that he's not comfortable in the pocket behind that offensive line. He's getting hit a lot. At least he did in the opener. He didn't get touched hardly at all on Sunday against the Rams, but in Washington he got knocked around a lot. It could be that there's so many coaches now in different roles, and maybe too many different voices are trying to communicate what he's supposed to do. Scangarello, we talked about with him, his mechanics. Did he try to do anything mechanically? And Carson did spend a lot of time working on his mechanics in the offseason. Maybe he's trying to change some things in that regard. But, I mean, anything is on the table here, Connor, as far as what's ailing Carson. And if I had the answer to what it was, I'd certainly, email Doug with the with the reason and give him a hand. But I don't really know if there's one reason or what that reason is. And I'm not sure Doug knows either. From the sound of things today, he sounded, pretty flustered. I mean, you saw his press conference. He kind of sighed a lot. He was like, and he kind of slowly started answers. Like he has no idea either, I don't believe.
My thing is, a lot of people on Twitter are seeing it seems like some people are starting to think this theory of Jalen Hurts being on the team, being drafted, is starting to get into Carson's mind. But I mean, he had Nick Foles as a backup, that won the Super Bowl, won Super Bowl MVP. was still on the team the year after and even led the team to the playoffs after Carson was removed from the starting lineup for the back injury. I fail to think that this is the Jalen Hurts is the reason why Carson Wentz is playing bad. I don't think Jalen Hurts is affecting Carson Wentz's mentality right now. But I mean, something's got to give. I'm interested to see. Look at Cincinnati. They actually have a pretty good pass rush. They have Geno Atkins. They have Carl Lawson over there. They just signed DJ Reader this offseason who stuffs the run. They cannot take Cincinnati lightly. Carson Wentz has to play well this game. Yeah. He has to come back and just silence the critics. I mean, because we're all looking at him like, what's going on? And then Doug Peterson, like you just said, I don't know. Do you think him and Carson are on the same page? Do you think Doug Peterson? Do you think he can rein Carson in right now? Is really what I'm asking.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear his answer to a question today about communication and how he communicates with Doug and with Carson, and does he need to try a different approach? And he doesn't want to have, he said, a contentious relationship between play caller and quarterback. So I don't know if there's communication issues, if Carson's not telling him what he sees when he comes off the field, if what he is voicing in the these game plan meetings that they have during the week is being properly conveyed. It could be a communication issue. And, it sounds like Doug's almost kind of got the gloves off and he's handling this as like, in a very kid-friendly way. Like he doesn't want to make any waves with Carson. So it could be a communication issue. His points just aren't going through. Maybe Carson's trying to do too much. He said today, Doug did, that he just wants him to be Carson again. So I don't know what Carson's going through. I mean, I know he's married. He's got the kid now on the home front. I mean, listen, it's all speculation. We don't know. Carson will talk to us, I think, Wednesday. He won't tell us much either, probably. But everything is on the table, like I said. And there's just so much speculation. And as far as Jalen Hurts and this rumor or whatever, this conjecture that's the issue, you would hope that Carson Wentz is a little bit more mentally tougher than worrying about, some rookie coming in and standing there shadowing you, waiting for you to fail. You would hope that he's more mentally stronger than that. And I assume that he is. I don't think it has to do with Hurts being on this team, but let's face it, Hurts was drafted in the second round for a reason. And we may see why if things continue along this path, and we're far from that point, I would think. But, listen, if this team's sitting there at 3-8 or whatever, 3-9, and Carson's just not playing well, then maybe you say, hey, let's see what the rookie has. Let's see what we have here. But again, we're so far from that point, and it would be such a huge controversy if Doug were to go that route, if this team continues to struggle to win games.
Do you think there's any disconnect between Howie Roseman and this coaching staff? Do you think there's anything off there at all?
Not that I've really seen. I mean, I don't think so. There could be maybe a little bit of a wedge with the Zach Ertz contract stuff. I know Doug wants to keep Zach Ertz on this team, and Howie Roseman probably doesn't, although I think they're going to try. I mean, we've talked about Zach Ertz over and over again, but you wonder if that has kind of driven a little bit of a wedge between the front office and the locker room, because Doug is the players' coach and he's going to take the players' side, and him coming out and saying, I'm all for whatever a player can get, being a former player. That probably ruffles some feathers in the front office hearing your coach talk like that. But I haven't heard anything along those lines that there's any kind of a disconnect or any kind of, trouble between the two elements. I don't think there is, but maybe the front office isn't happy with the approach Doug's taken on the whole Zach Ertz thing. He's clearly in Zach's corner when maybe the front office prefers him to remain a little bit more neutral with these contract talks.
That's fair. It's just they bring in these guys to the draft. They trade for Jernard Avery inactive. They get J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. The coaching staff struggles to utilize him whatsoever. They draft Jalen Hurts in the second round. I don't know if Doug makes that pick. If that's his decision. If he would say go ahead and take the quarterback there. So that's why I asked that question. And not only that, what really drove that question for me is you're listening to the press conference today. Somebody asked him the question of, does he feel the pressure from the front office to get Jalen Hurts on the field? And he quickly goes, no.
Yeah.
Like the abruptness in saying no right away like that, and the way he said it, maybe I'm like, is
Yeah,
something going on there?
you could read into that what you want. I mean, I just think it was him just dismissing the question. That was, I think it was Rob Motti from the AP that asked that question. But yeah, Doug shut that down pretty quick. And you know what? That's what Bill Belichick does, and that's what, maybe he needs to do a little bit more of that as far as this excuse making. Just you can see right through it. But again, Doug doesn't want to have that kind of relationship like with the media. He'd rather lie and tell half truths than just shut you down completely. I mean, that's not the way he operates. So, but maybe he needs to a little bit. Maybe when he's asked to back Zach Ertz, just say, you know what, that's Howie's job, front office, next question. A little bit more like that. That maybe we'd all get a question. And I know on these Zoom calls, it's awfully tough to get called on. You have 50 people on these things, and everybody's got their hand raised to get called on, and you can't get to everybody. But I would have liked to have heard a little bit more talk other than Carson Wentz today. I know Wentz is a big issue, and Doug really doesn't have a lot to do with the defense, but there was questions about Jason Peters, and he looked a little better, I guess, than he did in week 1. And just that line, is Matt Pryor going to start at the left tackle or left guard spot now that Isaac Seumalo's out, or is Jamon Brown going to step in there? I mean, there's a lot of things that I would like to know. And Darius Slay got hurt yesterday. He went out of the game. What's his injury status? We never got into any of that. So it'd be nice if we could all get some questions in, but today was kind of monopolized with Carson, and there's only so many ways you can say he's struggling and tell the truth about it.
There's a question from Dakota that we'll hit real quick, because I was going to address linebackers in the show, but since he's already on here asking, we'll just do it right now. He's asking if there's any open tryouts for linebacker, and he says he thinks he has more football sense than our current core does. A lot of people are not a fan of linebackers. I mean, Nate Gary played awful. He just played downright awful.
Yeah.
The defense is undervaluing the linebacker position. Is that have the potential to catch up to them this season?
Well, when you have a converted safety from college in his, third year, starting at linebacker, I mean, yeah, that could catch up to you. But just that defense in general, I mean, yeah, the linebackers, Nate Gary couldn't cover a tight end to save his life. And what are they going to do when they go to San Francisco in 2 weeks and have to play George Kittle? I mean, that's a big task. If you can't cover Tyler Higbee and Nate Gary couldn't, that's a problem. He was very undisciplined, but that whole defense was. And you have to look at the back end, like Rodney McLeod. Was he able to communicate and get guys lined up? I mean, it just seemed like there were guys that weren't in position, that were over pursuing on the play action or biting on the play action. And Jared Goff just rolls out to his right or left, whichever way he goes with the play action. And it's an easy throw for him. There's nobody covering the tight end running wide open, or Cooper Kupp running wide open. It was just bad overall. And the linebackers are in the spotlight because Gary was on the scene twice on Higbee touchdown passes, couldn't cover him, was out of position, getting lost and swallowed up by blockers. But yeah, if Dakota can tackle, he may want to send a resume down there to Howie if he's got the common sense. But now you got to know how to tackle too. So I don't know Dakota, but if you can, send your resume down to NovaCare.
A lot of fans are claiming for Nigel Bradley to be back too.
Yeah,
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening at all. I don't see the Eagles.
I think the die is cast here. I mean, listen, why not give your rookies a shot to at least try to cover a linebacker? They're athletic. Davion Taylor is still pretty raw, but I think Sean Bradley, I think he could find a role on this team.
Thank you. So that's what everybody's talking about Davion Taylor. From a person that watched, because I did watch his Colorado tape a lot, that guy's not ready. If they throw him out there now, they're gonna lose him because he's not gonna be able to play in this league at this point. But Sean Bradley, I would like to see him. I would like to see him out there. It can't be much worse than Duke Riley and Nate Gary.
No, I mean, look at the Chargers linebacker. I'm not the Chargers, the Rams linebacker yesterday, Micah Kaiser. He was a fifth-round draft pick in 2018, just 2 years ago. His rookie year, he played 16 games. He's 6'1", 240, not real big. He made 16 tackles yesterday, and he was the one that forced the fumble on Miles Sanders. I mean, here's a guy that was a fifth-round pick. I mean, Listen, you have to trust your players that Howie is drafting, for better or worse. If you're Doug, say, okay, Howie, we drafted him. We're going to throw him out there and we're going to play him, and let's see what he does. Let's see if your scouting staff was right. I mean, to me, Sean Bradley really had a pretty decent camp. I mean, I know he's young, he's a rookie, but you have to trust him sooner or later. Look at the safety, the Rams. I keep calling them the Chargers. I don't know why, but the Rams have a safety in Jordan Fuller. He was a 6th-round pick just this past spring, 2 rounds after Kayvon Wallace got picked, and he had 9 tackles. In the season opener, his rookie debut, he led the Rams in tackles. I mean, these are late-round picks that the Rams have hit on, and we haven't seen the Eagles. I know they put Casey Toohill in there yesterday, the 7th-round pick at defensive end, had 22 snaps, didn't show up on the stat sheet, didn't really show up in my binoculars either from the press box. But, I mean, they played him. That's good. Got some experience. We'll see where it goes from here. But you have to put these guys on the field. If your first unit guys aren't getting the job done like Nate Gary, then let's throw a rookie in there. Let's see what Sean Bradley can do. I don't know why they're hesitant to do it. He's athletic. He's fast. I think he could cover tight ends better than Gary. I mean, it's a low bar. Let's see what he's got.
I'm with you on that one completely. And another thing you just raised that I thought about the whole entire game is when I saw Marcus Epps line up at dime. Oh man. I don't care what Jim Schwartz said this training camp. Kayvon Wallace should be out there. Kayvon Wallace is a solid tackling safety. And we don't know and like you just said, the Rams trust this Kaiser, who I barely even knew. No, I'm not going to lie to you. I barely even knew going into that game. And then Jordan Fuller, I remember him from the draft, but he was everywhere over the ball. Kayvon Wallace cannot be worse than what Marcus Epps was in time, because I watched that play yesterday where he completely lost Cooper Kupp. I don't know what he was looking at. He turned his head completely to the offense and looked back in the deep secondary. But that's a guy out of position, though, Ed. That's not a guy you put in dime. So I know Will Parks would have been that guy there.
Right.
But, I mean, come on, man. Kayvon Wallace is your 4th-round pick. You hyped him up. I understand what Jim Schwartz said about rookies, but Marcus Epps doesn't have much more experience than Kayvon Wallace.
Yeah, and it's funny because Doug said we're going to have to count on our rookies. You know, initially he said you're going to have to lean on our veterans to start the season because the rookies won't be ready. But then, 2 weeks later, he's talking about, we're going to have to lean on these rookies. So let's start leaning on them. Let's throw them out there. I mean, Jalen Hurts gets in for 3 plays. I know Jalen Reagor's had a big role these last 2 weeks, but we haven't seen anything from Taylor. He played 8 special team snaps on Sunday. Bradley couldn't get in on the defense. He was 15 special team snaps, same as Wallace. Recovered a big fumble on special teams. Kayvon did, but let's roll these guys out there. Let's see what they have. I mean, it's time. It's time. You're 0-2. You're playing the Bengals. Let there be some accountability on this team, and let's sit some of these guys and see what the rookies can do. If you're going to lose, you're going to lose. All right, so you're 0-3. Listen, I just think that it could be the time to throw some of these guys out there and let them sink or swim.
So I was called irrational for thinking some of these points that you're making. It's time to start benching some players is basically what you're saying. It's time to start making some changes in that starting lineup, tweaking that a little bit. All right, so I do that. I do it with Nate Gary, which you obviously would too. Anybody else you're thinking that you think needs to come off the field?
Well, did you see Javon Hargrave do anything on Sunday? I mean, he played 25 snaps. I know it's his first time in.
That's but it's a whole new system too. It's not just that it's his first time in. It's a whole new. I don't want to kill him yet, but yes, I will say I was very disappointed in the whole entire defensive line, not just him. But
yeah, well, how about Derek Barnett? I mean, Josh Sweat looked very active on Sunday. Derek Barnett, I think he had one quarterback hit. He had a tackle. I'm just thinking guys that you could sit. You're not going to sit Rodney. I mean, Jalen Mills. Is this safety thing really working out? I mean, he just seemed like he was lost too. But who are you going to throw out there? You're going to put Kayvon Wallace in a starting role. I mean, I'm fine with Wallace as your 3rd safety until Will Parks gets back. Mm-hmm. But, some of your options are kind of limited with who you can park on the bench.
Especially with all these injuries now, because it's looking like Pryor's probably going to be left guard or Jamon
I don't
Brown.
know, but that, I mean, I like you said, I asked Doug the question, and he wasn't exactly glowing about the game Pryor had.
Yeah, there's something there. We're not seeing it. It's got to be in practice.
I guess. I mean, I didn't think he did that bad. I mean, the line didn't skip a beat when Siamalu went out. They didn't give up a sack. They gave up very few pressures. Aaron Donald had his worst game statistically, according to Pro Football Focus, since 2016. I mean, they did a good job, that offensive line. I don't know how you can make any changes at this point. You go with Herbig and you roll with Pryor. And if he struggles, then you have Jamon Brown sitting there. But, you know, he protects Carson, but then when it comes to Matt Pryor, he's, you know, well, he missed some calls, and, you know, that's part of being a backup. But it's just, you know, he didn't protect Pryor at all, but he protected Carson and what he had to say about Carson's struggles.
I don't even think Carson Wentz has I know this is off topic. I don't think Carson Wentz has a fragile ego. I don't think you have to coddle Carson Wentz. I don't understand why that's the approach. I mean, as much as we always kill the fans for being too much of a homer, they're teaching them to be that way with the way that they coddle Carson Wentz. I mean, I know Doug was criticizing him, but it's not to the point like you just said. It's like Matt Pryor, no confidence in Matt Pryor.
Yeah.
They coddle J.J. Arcega-Whiteside crazy.
How about that? And then you see like Bruce Arians down in Tampa, the opener after Tom Brady struggled, how he called out Tom Brady, you know, a legend for having a bad game.
I think that's good. Right. That challenges me. When I go to work and my boss tells me I didn't do a good job, that challenges me to do a good job. I don't know if this approach is working with Carson Wentz because, I mean, if he goes out and he's lackluster against the Cincinnati, you got to start ripping into him if you're the coach. That's on coaching. And at that point, if you're letting your quarterback be this erratic for now almost 3 games in a row, since I think the first half against Washington, he was pretty good. But other than that, I mean, yeah, it's yikes. But this is a good question right here. If the Eagles lose this week, are we going into meltdown mode? They start 0-3. I think you got to start panicking even more. I don't want to say you panic right now because, again, last year this team was 1-2 at the end of this week. So I don't want to say I'm panicking right now, especially with that extra playoff spot. I think they can make it at 9-7 if they do go 9-7. But if they lose to Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's 3rd game in the NFL, Zach Taylor, who's not a good coach, yes, I think there's time to start sweating big time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the good thing, I guess, is the NFC East stinks again, right? I mean, the Giants lost Saquon Barkley. Washington, we saw how bad they were against the Cardinals. They're very offensively challenged. The Eagles gave that game away with the turnovers. And then the Cowboys, you know, needed some miracle onside kick to complete a comeback against the Atlanta Falcons. So, you know, it's a very mediocre NFC East. But, you know, what's your longevity in the playoffs if you're sitting there at 9-7? Now, if you're hitting your stride at the right time, which the Eagles were kind of last year when they won those 4 in a row, and then Wentz gets hurt with the concussion and they bring in, you know, Josh McCown and, you know, everything goes down the tubes from there in that playoff game. But, you know, they were hitting their stride last year late, and then the injury thing happened. So, you know, if you're sitting there 9-7, I mean, listen, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but at 0-3 in the NFC East, listen, you can panic if you want, but I would say, you know, stay strong, you know, hang in there because the NFC East is not that good, and they just have to win those games. They can beat the Giants twice. They got to beat the Redskins. They split with Dallas. I mean, you never know, and I didn't mean to call them that, but the Washington football team, if you split with them. So, I mean, no, I'm not going to be ready to panic if they fall to 0-3, but I'll be pretty darn close.
If they were playing the Ravens this week, I wouldn't panic. But if they lose to the Bengals, though,
yeah,
the team that had the first overall pick, I mean, they were bad. I will say they cannot play down to them, though. Joe Burrow is legit. He's playing like an NFL quarterback right now.
Yeah,
they have the offensive skill players to really wreak havoc on the Eagles, and I think they have some players on defense. Their linebacking core, they took all their linebackers in this past draft, and they're contributed mightily. Akeem Davis-Gaither, who the Eagles took Davion Taylor over, which I didn't understand at the time, is dominating for them. They have Logan Wilson as well. I don't know. I mean, I think the Bengals. Granted,
the thing the Bengals have struggled with is stopping the run. They can't stop the run. And so, listen, the Eagles really leaned on Miles Sanders. And again, you only had 2 backs carrying the ball, Miles and Boston Scott. But you're going to have to run the ball, and you're going to have to take the pressure off course. And again, he threw it 42 times. It's a lot. I know they ran the ball 26 times. You know, I'd like to see them get that around 30. running the ball, and that's really going to have to be how you beat this team, is to run the ball, maybe keep Burrow and AJ Green and some of those other offensive weapons, Joe Mixon on the bench, while you eat up some clock, and use Deshaun Jackson in the first half. I mean, that was another
Oh
curious thing,
man.
was where was Deshaun in the first half? I'm looking like, yeah, he's playing, but they're not throwing him the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no deep shots. I don't know if it was something the Rams were doing, but there was no, like, we saw them fall in love with the deep ball against Washington. This week, they don't throw a deep pass.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I don't get it because I don't understand why they have this view of the veterans can just get into this rhythm automatically. They thought Jason Peters can get into a rhythm left tackle automatically. They thought Zach Ertz could get into a rhythm week one in the second half automatically after not even using him the entire first half, basically the whole entire game. And then Deshaun Jackson this week, they never use him in the first half. Don't target him at all. And then the second half, they come out at halftime and then they try to game plan the whole entire offense through him. And that's when they started rolling too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's when they moved the ball right down the
is.
field, and then Carson threw the interception to going for JJ. I mean, but Deshaun showed up on that drive, and he showed up on a couple other drives. But those mistakes hurt them. They get into these fourth downs, and it doesn't look like they have any clue what they're doing. Carson's throwing into double coverage. Right now it's a mess, and there's a lot of reasons for it.
A lot of reasons for it, but man, it's just tough to watch this defense play the way it's been playing. Also, I mean, is this finally the time that we start looking at Jim Schwartz and we start warming up that seat? I know it's such an early reaction. It's 0-2. I don't like starting this off that way, but I mean, you invested so much in that defensive line. They're not living up to par. They gave you the defensive line coach that you begged for, and your own pal Matt Burke. They do all their personnel decisions the way Jim Schwartz wants them to be done. He has all say over that personnel. He tells who they bring in. When do they start considering his job to start being a little shaky?
Yeah, he's the head coach of the defense, and he's going to talk to us on Tuesday. We'll see, what kind of answers he has. But, I mean, this could be the year that it's the hot seat. It's just, and here's something that I was thinking about during the game was it was so, there wasn't the fans. And you know how this Eagles defense always plays pretty well at home for the most part. And they really feed off of that crowd. They're always, signaling the crowd to, turn up the noise and get louder and stuff like that. And to not have that, you wonder how much that affected them. It was their first game at home. I know it sounds like an excuse, but, they just didn't seem to have that same energy that the fans usually help give them, and they feed off of that. So I don't know if that's something they're still adjusting to. And, now that they've seen what it's like, now they have Cincinnati, maybe they'll have to find that extra motivation somehow amongst themselves. But, that could be a reason. But, yeah, not to absolve Schwartz of any blame here because, he has to adjust. He has to understand his personnel better. This love affair with Nate Gary, I think, has to kind of stop, and they have to try to find someone else that can play in there. Maybe TJ Edwards gets more of a role. The offseason, everybody talked about how he was really going to be the guy that steps up, and he hasn't played more. I think he had 29 snaps against the Rams. He had 20, I think, in the season opener. I mean, maybe it's time to give him more of a role and see what he can do in coverage and in stopping the run because, to me, Nate Gary was a big liability on that field yesterday.
Huge liability. This is actually a good question right here. Such a mistake letting Jenkins go. That was the heart and soul of the team and a leader. Do you think they're missing Malcolm Jenkins right now?
Yeah, I thought about that too. I mean, sure, I think they're missing him. I think the communication level alone, I think he was good at getting the defense lined up. And against a team like the Rams that gives you a lot of different formations to look at, a lot of different movement, a lot of eye wash, as it's called. I think Malcolm would have done a good job getting guys lined up and held them accountable. And Rodney just, for some reason, he couldn't communicate where to get the defense lined up, or Nate Gary couldn't do it either. He's the one with the headset in his helmet. I think absolutely.
Well, Doug wouldn't even give a definitive answer to that. Doug wouldn't even get. I remember Jeff McClain asked that question, and Doug scooted around that as fast as he could. He says, "Well, it depends who who you ask what the play is. It could
Yeah,
be
a lot of
Nate, it could be
communication in
TJ.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know.
man, you are just dancing around this media stuff.
Well, if that's really the right answer, then it's a mess because it's not working.
yeah,
It's too confusing. I mean, if he's not pulling our leg on that or trying to conceal something, then shame on them for letting it be so confusing. I mean, you have to have one communicator out there, one person that has the last say on where people should be before the ball is snapped. And Malcolm was that guy. So yeah, I absolutely think they're missing Malcolm. Would he have made a difference yesterday in the outcome? I don't
no.
know. I mean, one guy making a difference is a lot when you have 11 guys on the field at once. But he certainly would have helped. I think they probably win Washington too if he's out there.
They miss Malcolm from a tackling standpoint. He was their best tackler on that team. They do not have a good tackler on this team right now. That's the unfortunate part. I love Rodney McLeod, misses a ton of tackles. Nate Gary, known for missing a ton of tackles. Jalen Mills whiffed a couple times in runs defense yesterday and with his tackles. They don't have a solid tackler on this team right now. And that's where Malcolm Jenkins, where I think is missed because, again, this is a guy who gets 100-plus tackles every year.
Yeah. I thought Josh Sweat looked pretty good as a tackler. I thought Sweat made some good tackles yesterday.
Yeah, I'm talking in the back.
The athletic guys, not those big guys up front. I agree. But I think they just missed Jenkins' communication, too. I just think there wasn't an offense that he hasn't seen. He knows how to get to his guys. He was a respected guy. He was a good communicator. And I just think the communication issue is a real big issue because he's not there.
It was an issue last year, too, though. I agree with you because I think it's less last year than it is already this year to start off because we've seen a lot of blown coverages already in Washington and yesterday. But I mean, we've seen it. Malcolm's been a part of it for years with us with blown coverages, and it does have to do with cornerback play. It's a shame that when the Eagles finally get a true number one corner in Darius Slay, Malcolm Jenkins isn't here to enjoy it finally. But
yeah, we get to watch him later tonight, with the Saints against the Raiders, Monday Night Football. So we'll at least get to see him and see what we're missing. I don't know what he did in the opener. I didn't really check it out, but I'm sure he's helping the Saints for sure.
Right, but he made a good business decision to go to a stacked secondary too, because it's not like he's with the Eagles anymore. That they have from top to bottom, they're good at every position in that secondary right now in New Orleans. So good for him, but. It's something that you said I thought was interesting too. You don't think Jalen Mills is working out at safety so far?
What was that? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
You don't think Jalen Mills is working out at safety so far?
Oh, Jalen Mills. No, I think it's a big work in progress still.
I think he's always good against run defense. I think you could say even from a corner, when he recognizes run out of the backfield instinctively. Other than that, I haven't seen anything to really hold my hat on.
Yeah, and yesterday I didn't see a whole lot of instincts on the run game too. I mean, he seemed to get kind of caught up with the blockers. He didn't do a good job getting off blocks to make tackles.
He whipped on that Darrell Henderson big run.
Yeah,
he whipped on him bad,
and that was a huge play. I mean, that comes right after the Eagles decide to take the 3 points and not the penalty and go for it on would have been 4th and 3 at the 10 had they taken it, but Doug kept the points on the board, counting on your defense to make a stop. And then Darrell Henderson runs for 40 yards, and all of a sudden they're in field goal position. So just that was a bad play all around. And it started with Mills. Mills has to make that tackle. And, I don't know if he'll ever get it. You hope. Again, game 2, no preseason, no OTAs. I know that's what Doug says with some of these guys. But in Mills' case, when he's transitioning to a new position, it's going to take time. It's going to take a couple weeks to get it right.
All right, so Ed Kracz gets hired as the Philadelphia Eagles general manager. He gets to make the decisions of how he takes over this current team right now. They're 0-2. He's in the trenches. How does Ed fix the Philadelphia Eagles? What does he do? What does he do first? How does he fix this mess?
And I still have like $70 million that I have to trim off my payroll to get under.
No. I just want to hear how you try to right the ship so far. What would you do to change a couple of things right now?
Well, like I said, I would start with, and I know Howie, I don't think it's too involved with, the game day personnel, but I would like to see the guys that I drafted get more of an opportunity. Let's see what, I'm glad Tuhill got in. But let's see a package of plays for Jalen Hurts. Let's see him, catch the ball or run the ball or wildcat the ball. Do something to justify taking him in the second round. Let's see what Sean Bradley can do. Throw Kayvon Wallace out there until Will Parks is ready to come back. We saw Jack Driscoll. He looked promising, but you have Lane Johnson back. Good depth piece now for Driscoll. But, I would want to see what the guys I drafted can do. And then I guess beyond that, I would keep a real close eye on the trade market. You have the trade deadline that comes up in, I guess, the end of October. Are you going to be a buyer or a seller? So you need to start looking around at the personnel that's out there who might want, a defensive tackle. Fletcher Cox, you'd hate to trade Cox. It would really be a shock wave sent through that locker room. But, Zach Ertz, do you look to trade him? Do you look to start building some draft capital going into the 2021 draft? So I would start to look around to see what teams are deficient in some of the areas that you're strong in, that I'm strong in, as well as if I'm going to be a buyer, who's going to be out there on a team that might be ready to pack it in that will trade me something that can help me in some of my areas of weakness, and maybe I start looking at linebacker. It's a position that Howie's devalued. And we've seen that, listen, you got to tackle these guys. You have to find someone that can tackle the ball carrier in a division that has Ezekiel Elliott. You had Saquon Barkley until he tore his ACL, but you need someone that can play physical up front and that can get off a block and make a tackle. So maybe I start paying attention to the linebacker. As far as immediate help, I don't know what I could do other than say, let's see what my rookies can do. Let's see what this class that I brought in can do. I drafted 10 players. Let's start using some of them in roles other than special teams.
Do you bring in an offensive coordinator?
I don't really see any in-coaching changes. I mean, Doug is, in effect, the offensive coordinator. He calls the plays. It could be a mistake in hindsight, bringing in, an offensive consultant, a senior offensive coach. I mean, all these different guys that they brought in to kind of muddy the waters. How effective is the coaching communication, getting the right play called at the right time? I mean, that might have been a mistake, but I don't see any coaching moves happening in season. That would be of against what the Eagles did. That's why when Chip Kelly got canned, it was a shock because it came with one game left in the season back in 2015. And that's not usually the way they operate, but they were so fed up with Chip that they wanted him out pronto.
Immediately.
So that's why they canned him. But I don't see any coaching changes happening in season.
Neither do I. I would just think in this offseason, I would be interested to see how they look at offensive coordinator this time around now. Because, I mean, again, this is such an early reaction because they're only 0-2. But a lot of fans seem to think Frank Reich had this huge influence on this team that Doug's missing him. In fact, so that's why I proposed that question to you. But do you think there is some merit to that?
Well, here's what Frank Reich brought to the Eagles back when they won the Super Bowl, and that was a voice that Doug wasn't wary of listening to. Doug took a lot of counsel from Frank Reich, and they were the last two coaches to look at the game plan before they went to bed the night of a game, or the night before a game, when everything was already put together, when all the other cooks had their hand in their say in what the game plan was going to look like. It was Doug and Frank that sat down and went over it with a fine-tooth comb and put some new wrinkles in if they felt it was needed, tweaked a couple things here and there. But those two had a great relationship, a great rapport where they were comfortable with one another. They weren't threatened by each other. They were very confident in who they were and what their roles were. And it's like a consigliere, with the Godfather, that voice that you listen to. And that's what Frank Reich was to Doug Peterson. He was his consigliere. Those guys worked hand in hand to craft the best game plan they could. They would work into the early morning hours looking at that thing, just the two of them, talking about that, talking about life, talking about everything other than the game plan too. So, that kind of friendship and that kind of relationship is what Frank Reich brought to the Eagles. And that's what Doug doesn't have. He didn't have that relationship with Mike Groh. I don't think he has it with Rich Scangarello, who they hired to bring in. I wonder if he has it with Press Taylor, who's just, he's a 30-something-year-old that, you wonder how much Doug respects what he's saying. Whereas Frank Reich and Doug, they were contemporaries. They were both backup quarterbacks, and they worked terrific together. I mean, that's the kind of chemistry that they had in that coaching room that they don't have right now.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being a problem. At least he had somebody that he could bounce his
Yeah,
script off
right.
of and see if he thinks it's right.
Yeah,
Dakota mentioned something earlier in the comments too about the lack of no John D. Filippo anymore affecting Carson Wentz. He doesn't have. I think this is more of an assumption than anything, but from the general public. But he doesn't have that guy, that quarterback coach that pushes him anymore. Uh, BLG, Bleeding Green Nation reported that Press Taylor and Carson are just buddies. There's
right.
nobody that's really pushing Carson anymore. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think that's a real thing?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I mean, DeFilippo didn't want to be your friend. I mean, he was your coach. You know, it's the same with a boss and employer relationship. You have to draw the line if you're the boss. You can't get buddy with your employers or your employees. Um, and it's the same with DeFilippo and Carson. You know, DeFilippo made sure Carson was listening, put things in, and same with Frank Reich. You know, Reich had a big hand in that game planning too with Carson. And Carson, I don't think liked some of the input, but he went along with it. So again, it comes down to Carson. Is he really communicating? Is he really hearing the message that the Eagles are trying to give to him, or is he just kind of going out there and just trying to do too much and trying to be a hero on every play and hit a home run whenever he can? I mean, to me, they need to find somebody with a voice that is more experienced. And it was kind of a curious move to put Press, I think, in that role as a quarterback's coach. I didn't quite understand it because they are the same age. You know, I think you'd rather have a voice that's, you know, like a Mike Caldwell. You know, they talked to Mike Caldwell about coming in. I'd have liked to have seen that. But yeah, I think that's an issue. I think you need more of a veteran, experienced voice to get through to Carson. And if he doesn't like what you're telling him, well, that's tough. You're going to do it or you're going to be on the bench. You know, but I think Carson maybe feels like he's just got the free reign to do whatever pleases him. And he's the guy out there with the ball in his hand.
The head
And
coach allows that though. That's the thing. That's
yeah,
where I've said it multiple times this week on this podcast. I said it to you when we record on Saturday. My worry is what Doug Peterson is.
yeah,
Whereas when he had Nick Foles, he knew his limitations and he basically game planned his whole entire system around Nick Foles' limitations. With Carson, there's a belief which he's shown time and time again he can play like a top 10 caliber quarterback, regardless what the trolls want to say about him, regardless what people want to say about him. It's the truth. He's
yeah,
played like a top 10 caliber quarterback. But I do think there is some issue. There is some disconnect between Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz, where Doug just thinks Carson is good enough to let him play the game the way he wants to play it. I think that's not a good approach. I
right.
don't think Bill Belichick had that approach with Tom Brady.
No. In fact, you know, but Belichick wouldn't call him out in public like Arians did in Tampa. But behind the scenes in those meetings, you know, Belichick and Brady they would go at it. They would both voice their opinions, and it was Belichick's way in the end because he was the coach. Brady didn't like it, but he went along with it. And you know, when you hear Doug talk about you don't want a contentious relationship between play caller and quarterback like he talked about today, that's a worry. You know, he wants it to be, you know, like a father. I don't even want to say father son because you know fathers can be tough on their sons, but it's more like that buddy,
Yeah.
yeah, approach. And listen, I don't know what's wrong with being contentious, and you know, okay, so you're not playing well. Well, this is why you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Instead of, well, let's try and do it this way. You know what I mean? Like you have to be firm in
Yeah.
that room. And you know, Carson Wentz an alpha mentality. We all know that. And unless you have somebody with an alpha mentality dealing with him, he's going to run roughshod over you, I think. And I hate to say these kind of things, but this is kind of the way it looks for me. When I look at what Doug said today and the way Carson's playing, it's just I don't know how
It's the
coachable he
truth.
is at this point.
It's the truth. It's weird because it's weird that Doug has such emphasis on. Well, you know, you have to have your limits of how you criticize a
Yeah,
player. When
yeah,
it comes to Carson, it's weird. It's you're dealing with a fifth year player here. You're not dealing with a rookie quarterback. I
right.
think that's weird. I don't know why he has because it's not like you guys are making him say that. He's just because he said it on WIP, and then he goes into that press conference and he says the same thing. He's the one who's emphasizing that I want to be more buddy with my quarterback than I do want to be a dictator.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's
Yeah,
weird.
and again, it's speculation, and we're just reading the tea leaves here. But I think there's something to it. I really do. And you see Carson.
I've never heard Bill Walsh go into a press conference and say, I want to have a coddling type relationship with my quarterback. I've never heard Bill Belichick say. I've never heard
Yeah.
Sean Payton say it about Drew Brees. That's you guys are the two leaders of the team. You shouldn't be buddy buddy. You should be trying to make each other better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is you don't want resentment. I'm looking at the transcript now, and it's he doesn't want to have an attack style with his quarterback. You don't want resentment between the quarterback and the play caller. You want to have an open dialogue. So he's afraid that if he's stepping on Carson's toes, that open dialogue is going to shut down. Is what it sounds like to me. But yeah, that was kind of interesting to hear him talk like that. Is he just wants to kind of be buddy with Carson and not make any waves, and it's not working.
Literally, you and I on Saturday are laughing about this Tony Pauline report. Now I'm like, what's going on with Doug Peterson? He does not sound like Doug Peterson at all. And Mark has a good question that I think I know the answer to personally, but I'm interested to see how you feel about it. Do you think Doug's on the hot seat if the season's a wash?
Well, I thought Doug might have been on the hot seat last year unless they won those last 4 games or, because I know they had injuries and stuff. But, I he's under contract through 2022. And, listen, if they go 4-11, I know Lurie gave Andy Reid every opportunity to try to right the ship. And Andy just couldn't do it. And Andy really wanted to try to do it even after right before they fired him. But listen, Doug won a Super Bowl. That buys him, I think, some time.
Yes.
I think with 2 years left on his deal, it probably gets him another year. But again, let's see how this whole thing winds up. 0-2 right now. It's not inconceivable if they go 5-11, and the schedule looks pretty tough. That's a legitimate question. Should he be brought back? I think right now that they would bring him back, but check back in November, check back at Thanksgiving, and we'll see where that stands.
I'm with you there. I think the trophy buys him time, but I will say Jeffrey Lurie is the type of owner that is not quick to deal with mediocrity. If he feels this team is better than they performed, he will make changes, and he did this past offseason. That was really Lurie's choice to get rid of Mike Rowe. So I want to say no because of the trophy, but if they go 5-11, man, they go out and get Darius Slay. They finally get the number 1 corner that we begged for. They get Javon Hargrave. They get the defensive tackle too. They believe that's going to be the transcendent talent to add next to Cox. All the moves they made. If they go ahead and go 5-11, if it's not Doug, it's going to be Howie or it's going to be Jim. It's somebody big named is going to be out of there.
Yeah, it could be Jim, depending on the defense. This defense has to right itself. They're giving up points in the red zone like ridiculous. 7 for 9. They've given up touchdowns to opponents going into that red zone. I mean, that's a problem. They're not getting turnovers. That has been a problem under Schwartz now for a number of years. So yeah, it could be Jim that gets shown the door here. And again, they just revamped that offensive staff. I mean, how many more moves can you make on that coaching staff? You just brought in Scangarello and Morningweg and Andrew Briner, and then, you brought in Aaron Moorhead. You elevated Press Taylor. You gave more responsibility to Jeff Stoutland. I mean, how many more moves can you make just a year after making moves on the assistant coaching staff from the offensive side? It's a great question, and it's one that, sitting here, 2 games into the season, it's tough to answer. But again, check back in November. Let's see how this season unwinds, and if Doug deserves to be brought back for one more crack at this. I don't know that answer right now.
Yeah, it's too early to even figure out right now. If they squeak into the playoffs like they did last year and the year prior, he's not going anywhere. That's another thing. If they do that, it just depends how the defense finishes the season. Because even if they do that, I think Jim Schwartz is still on the chopping block. They've too much money invested there, and I think if you're Howie Roseman and you're Jeffrey Lurie, you're thinking to yourself, "We finally added that number 1 corner. This shouldn't be like this."
Right. But now do you have to look at the linebackers? I mean, do they self-evaluate themselves with their decision-making to bring in nobody at linebacker?
And a lot of people blame Howie for that. I blame Jim because I just remember last year a strong report going out And I know somebody that is in the Eagles scouting department who backed this report about them wanting Jamie Collins. That's the linebacker they were in on. And then Jim goes into the office and says, no, Zach Brown. We need to go after Zach Brown. And then they signed Zach Brown, and you already know how that went. It won't last a couple weeks. I think the devaluation of linebackers isn't a Howie Roseman thing. I'm not sure Howie Roseman knows how to draft linebackers, though. That's another discussion for a different show. But I think he's, again, Howie Roseman doesn't make the moves on the defense. Jim Schwartz does.
Yeah, it's his call. It's like, okay, how do you want to run your defense? What do we need? And Jim gives them his list, and they go out and try to satisfy that list. But you're right. I mean, it's a Jim Schwartz de-emphasis on the linebacking position. He had Malcolm Jenkins kind of covering for him all those years, and now you hope Will Parks is going to be that guy. Once he's able to return, he can play a lot of different spots. But that's kind of what they need. That's the way Jim's defense runs, and it's not linebacker driven. And right now, it's looking like that's a mistake.
Yeah, Dakota thinks Jim has overstayed his welcome.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah,
a lot of Eagles fans are thinking that right now. All right, Ed. Yeah. So I'm sure we'll talk on Saturday as we usually do, and we'll probably feel a lot more better going into that matchup as well. But right now, do you think this team can beat the Bengals?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, it would be great if there were fans there. I think they would have had a better chance against the Rams, and certainly Joe Burrow coming into this type of an environment. I know he played in some big ones at LSU, but this kind of environment, that would have made a difference. But it's not there. The Eagles are going to have to find a way to, do some soul searching and go out there and get the job done. And I think they have a lot of prideful players on this defense. And I think they'll find a way to get it done. I really do. I mean, I'm not panicking yet. I know it's 0-2, and there is something to, no preseason with this team and no OTAs, and maybe the Eagles handled it wrong and how they approached it. But I still believe. I still think they're going to find a way to right this, beat the Bengals. Then you go to San Francisco, who's really banged up. They lost Nick Bosa to the ACL, and Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt. So, I mean, now you're facing a banged-up 49ers team. And then we'll see. Then if that gets you to 2-2, then we'll see where we're at going. I guess who's next? Pittsburgh, maybe?
I think it's Pittsburgh. Yeah, and then Baltimore right after.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a tough.
It is a tough schedule.
But if you can get to 3-3, we'll see how things look then. And it starts, though, with Sunday with the Bengals. And, right now, sitting here just 24 or 36 hours after the loss to the Rams, I think they can beat Cincinnati.
I think they can too, so hopefully that does happen. All right, we'll talk to you on Saturday. Everybody, this episode of Eagles Brawl will be on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. Ed, we'll see you on Saturday.